So we're going to center this tripod on the bores. This is an excavator quick change, and we're going to build up these two bores, this one and the one below it. So we'll center on these holes first with our centering tool. Simply install this in the bore. Screw it out until the three legs come in contact with the bore, and ensure that it's tight. Now we'll take our chrome mounting rod that comes with the bore welder, and we will install it on the tripod, and again ensure that it's tight. Now all we do here is we check to make sure that both of these bars are parallel this way and that they're parallel this way. So now we'll just take a quick measurement with our tape measure, make sure that we're parallel in this direction first. We're actually fairly good that way. We are tipped a little bit this way, so I'm going to use the adjustable feet to tip the chrome mounting rod back towards the camera a bit. Double check that. We'll double check our alignment this way. And then lastly, we'll use the centering cone to make sure that we are centered in the bore, which we are not. So we'll just move the tripod a touch. We are now centered because that's dropped in the hole. So we'll just double check our alignment. So now that we're all centered up, we'll take the centering adapter out. And we'll set our bore welder up. One thing I do want to do, because we're in a vertical application, we've got this split ring that comes with the bore welder kit. I'm going to install it, and that will stop the bore welder from dropping vertically when I make my adjustments. And we'll just install it on the guide bar, and we can let it sit on that split ring we previously installed. We'll select the appropriate extensions and torch nozzles, and we'll get centered in the bore. So I have our torch swivel assembly, a straight extension, and our torch nozzle that's correct for the 4 1/8 diameter bore that we're going to do. You can see that our torch swivel pivots, and this is our adjustment for diameter. We can put the swivel directly on the bore welder and follow it with the appropriate extensions, or we can install the extension directly on the bore welder and follow it with the torch swivel. This is purely a matter of operator preference. Either way is acceptable. So we've installed our straight extension. Now we'll install a swivel. Again, order is purely operator preference and may vary with each job. Install this and snug it. So at this point we'll install our whip in the bore welder. This does a couple things for us. It gets the wires started into the bore welder. It also allows me to put power to the bore welder, which will allow me to retract the nozzle out, give me more room to install it. So I'll just ensure that this goes into the liner. Align the flat pin with the flat mark. Twist to lock. And tighten the thumb screw to hold in place. We'll do up our electrical connection. And we'll turn the power on. So we'll retract our torch swivel up a little bit so we have some room to work down there. So I'm going to feed a little bit of wire through just to make sure that it comes all the way through our torch swivel. It'll make it actually a little bit easier to install our torch while we're at it. So first thing to do is make sure that your ground clamp is not connected, because the wire will feed live at this point. Okay. So we have our wire stuck through. We'll get it in the liner of the torch nozzle, and then we'll install the torch nozzle. Now when we install this torch nozzle, we want the brass nozzle to be 90 degrees offset from the set screw in the torque swivel. And the reason for that is that's our adjustment for bore diameter. We need it to pivot this way and such. Any other orientation will not work. So it needs to be either 90 degrees off this side or 90 degrees off that side. Now in this instance it wants to stop with a poor alignment, so we'll bring it back until the alignment is correct and tighten the jam nut. At this point we're ready to center our nozzle in the hole. So I'm going to start in the bottom bore just for clearance issues. I don't want to reduce the clearance I have at the top because I'm working through the top bore. So I'll start at the bottom, I'll work my way up, and when I get to the top I'm not interfering with anything I have to do up there. So we'll bring the nozzle down just until it comes to the top edge of the hole, and now we can begin centering. So we know that our tripod is centered on both bores and that our chrome mounting rod is centered front to back in the holes. What we really need to do now is make sure that the nozzle is going to be centered in the hole. So we'll loosen off the welder and just rotate the body of the welder in order to gain center in this bore. And we'll rotate that nozzle around to make sure that we've come to the right location. Now when centering, the easiest thing to do is find where you're closest to the bore. In this case we're touching here and we have a gap here. The easiest way to find center is to simply loosen the welder and rotate it until we remove half of the gap. And we'll rotate again to confirm. So we're still a little bit closer to the front side of the bore than we are to the back side. So again, loosen off the pinch bolt, rotate the welder until approximately half of the gap disappears, and continue on with the process until we're satisfied. So I'll retract the nozzle out. I'm going to set my distance from the bore wall to the torch nozzle, and I want to set it so that my welding wire is sticking out for use with this wire approximately 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to feed wire until I have the appropriate amount of stick out. So now we'll put the nozzle back in the bore and pull it away until the wire just touches the edge of the bore. Now we can make our final adjustment. Alright, so we're ready to set our depth and program our controller, and then we can continue the welding process. So now that we've gone through the centering process, rotating the nozzle in the same direction all the time, it has a tendency to cause a twist in the wire as you're doing that. So the best thing a person can do for themselves is to just feed a couple of feet of wire out and trim that twisted portion off. If you leave the twist, it'll cause a wire flip in the bore, which will leave an actual dent in the weld, and that dent will follow all the way up the bore. We don't want that. We want as nice a weld finish as possible. So before we hit the go button, we'll just feed out a couple of feet of wire and trim it off. So now that we've fed out, we'll just trim off to the appropriate length. So you can see we have a small kink in the wire. This is the kink I was talking about earlier. It will leave a flip in the bore, and that flip will continue all the way through your welding process. So it's best to just trim a piece off and dispose of it. So now we'll travel down to our desired start location in the bore. So now that we've come to the start point of our bore, we'll program for the weld. In this case, we're just going to do a regular circular pattern. We've pre-measured the bore to be 4 1/8 inch diameter. So it's just a straightforward circular program, which we'll do now. We'll select circular and enter. Clockwise or counterclockwise, for our purposes it doesn't matter. Certain specific jobs may call for specific rotations. We'll just pick whatever comes up. Our bore diameter is set at 3.1 inches from the last job, so we'll increase it to 4.1 and enter. Our step size is defaulted at 0.12 inches. That seems to work well for our welding settings, so we'll just enter. Asks us for a start location. Again, in this job it doesn't matter, so we can just enter. Now we're ready to go. The last step is to connect our ground clamp and don our appropriate safety gear. Just push weld, confirm our settings are happy, and enter. So now you can see that we've moved to the top bore. We've taken the straight extension out, and of course because we had to move our SmartWelder in order to accomplish that, we will need to recenter on the top bore. So we'll just go back through the same process that we did with the last one. So we've completed our centering process on the second bore. So again, we'll run out a couple of feet of wire just to remove any twists. And we'll set our location for welding. So because our programming hasn't changed from the last bore, we simply need to reconnect our ground, which I've done, and we can press weld and enter.